everyone. Welcome to Confidently Be You. My name is Jennifer Shlomovich, and today I'm going to be talking about a topic that is really near and dear to my heart. In this video, I'm going to be discussing living a vegan lifestyle and shedding light on some of the top vegan myths with my special guest, Lisa Apfelberg. Lisa is Deputy Executive Director at the organization Jewish Veg. Lisa's personal mission has long been to teach people about plant-based eating in whatever way is helpful to them. She hosts vegan cooking classes for her birthday every year and meets people at the grocery store to teach them how to shop for vegan products. A lifelong Jewish communal professional, Lisa is thrilled to help run an organization that lies at the intersection of Judaism and veganism, which are her two passions. Additionally, Lisa lives in a tiny house on an organic farm in Austin, Texas with her family. Lisa, welcome.
Thank you.
I'm so excited to have you here. I know there's so many things that we can talk about, and I definitely want to have you back to talk about tiny houses and living on an organic
I would
farm.
love to.
So definitely want to have you back for that. But today we're going to talk about veganism, which is a big topic we're both passionate about. I've
Right.
been vegan since 2017, so since April 2017, so I'm almost to my 6-year vegan journey, and it was a process to get to that point. So I'm really excited to talk to you about veganism, talk about the myths, because there's a lot of myths out there, as well
For
as sharing
sure.
some success tips, and we're going to talk about some helpful resources. So before we get started on all of that, what inspired you to do what you do?
Um, So I have always been a person who felt like I was lucky to be raised in the family I was raised in with the resources I needed. And I was just born with an intense amount of empathy and compassion. I was the type of child who was really upset about homeless people. When I learned that meat came from an animal that had been killed, that sounded really awful and scary to me. And obviously I didn't know the real details of how awful and scary it is, but I decided I was going to be a vegetarian at that time. And then I just kind of wanted to do work. As long as you work for so many hours in the week and it takes you away from your family, your hobbies, your other stuff, I decided I wanted to do work that gives back. And my passion initially was just the Jewish community. So I've done a lot of work in the Jewish community, building Jewish communities and connecting people to Jewish community, helping them find the things they need. And then about 6 years ago, but like I was privately vegan or not so private, because everyone who knows I'm vegan and knows about my birthday parties and knows that if they want to learn more, they can contact me and I'll meet them at the grocery store, that kind of thing. But about 6 years ago, I realized there was a real connection between Judaism and veganism. And I was like, wow, that's fascinating, because I always felt like I was Jewish and vegan, not, Jewish and vegan. And so I started reaching out to the organizations that were working on this and offered to volunteer and help in any way I can, which is like how I almost always get future jobs, because I'm a really passionate and active volunteer. And that's what happened here as well, is that I found out about these organizations. I started volunteering, and now I've been working in the Jewish vegan world for 5 years. And I just think it's really important. I think people do not realize how destructive the animal agriculture industry is and how much they're contributing to, climate change, global warming, pandemics, horrible animal cruelty. And so I'm an activist and I teach about it.
That is awesome. And yeah, there's a lot I didn't know about that either. Like, I knew a little bit about it. For me, it started with health stuff to transition into veganism. My mom died from a heart attack, and my father had a lot of health issues, and then he recently passed away
I'm so
last
sorry.
year. And so my parents' health issues and then noticing how certain foods made me feel like I wanted to start doing better for myself. And it really started with dairy. I noticed
Mm-hmm.
that dairy was impacting my skin, and it was
Mm-hmm.
also giving me like respiratory issues. And so I read to
Mm-hmm.
eliminate certain foods and then see how you react to that. And I noticed
Totally.
taking a break from dairy for a month, like, oh my God, I feel better without it. And then I would have
100%.
cheese and ice cream, and I felt like crap after.
I just said to someone the other day, we did like a little vegan cheese tasting at my house with some friends who wanted to come see the new tiny house. And I was saying that I have never met anyone or heard a story of anyone who went off dairy who didn't feel better. I mean, it's not a scientific study, but everyone I've ever talked to is like, I gave up dairy. And it's like stuff you don't realize because you just think that's your normal state, like being
Mhm.
bloated or being mucusy or like coughing and sneezing more or having to clear your throat more or having, acne or whatever. It's just that people think that's their normal state, and then they go off dairy and they feel so much better. The other thing I wanted to say is I remember going to a talk a couple years ago, and there was a doctor who was speaking. This was a talk about plant-based lifestyles, and he was talking about how when he was in medical school like 27 years ago, he wanted to be a cardiovascular surgeon, and he learned about the connections between food and health, or food as medicine, which is now a term. And he thought, great, the field I want to go into, there's going to be no need for it, because now that we're learning about this, everyone's going to be eating healthy and we're not going to have these issues. And of course, that has not come true at all for him, and people are having all the issues related to a lot of what they eat for, for many, many decades. And he phrased it really nicely, which I think you'll relate to. He said, I went vegan for health because of all that I was learning when I was in medical school. But now I'm so proud to say I'm vegan for all the reasons, because he learned more about animals and how they were suffering and their treatment. And he learned more about climate and environment and global warming and how it's all connected. And I just love that story of like people opening up their minds and hearts and connecting it all together. And I imagine that that's something you really relate to.
I relate a lot to that. Yeah, absolutely, because it that's exactly what it was. It started with that health, and then as I learned more about the, impact on animals, which, there's a sense of detachment to it when we're growing up, because
Mm.
you figured these things out younger. When I was younger, like I knew it, but it didn't, there was like that disconnect, I think, to like
Mhm.
fully, but
Right.
once I started thinking about it, I just couldn't do it. And I was vegetarian for a bit. Because it takes time. I think when people think of making a lifestyle change, they think, oh, I got to change all at once. And it was a gradual thing. Like I would be off dairy, and then I would have dairy again. And dairy was easy for me to just totally give up because
Right. Because
it
you were
didn't feel
feeling
like
so
crap.
much better. Yeah.
Then I started noticing how I felt with meat too. Like it just was heavy, just how it digested. And then when I took breaks, again, you
Mm.
don't realize how crappy you feel. I would take breaks from meat and have just like fish and vegetables. And that I realized, you know what, meat was then like the next easy thing for me to.
Mhm.
The last,
Mhm.
I never liked eggs anyway. I would eat baked goods and things with them, but I never liked
Right.
scrambled eggs. So that was never an issue. The last thing for me to go was the fish. And then that
Mm.
completely, and then it was just easy. It got easier as went along.
Right.
But yeah,
Right.
but
Well, you said two things that I want to respond to. I mean,
yeah,
one
sure.
is that I actually think that children are born vegetarians. I mean, children love animals. They sleep with a
Hmm.
stuffed animal. Their wallpaper is often stuffed animals. Their bedspread is. And it's just years and years of everyone who they know and trust, their parents, grandparents, big siblings, cousins, aunties, nutritionists, kindergarten teacher telling them, it's food, eat it, it's food, eat it, it's food, eat it, that eventually they lose that compassion for the little pig or the little, cow that they loved. Children don't want to hurt others. And so it just wears it out of them after they're just told this, and they forget that they originally felt that way. So I really believe that most people are born as vegetarians because we don't want to cause harm and we love animals. And you just get, your brain forgets because you're told. And then the other thing I was going to say was that I really dislike that excuse that so many people give, like, I can't go fully vegan because of X. There's always some like, we have a family burger night and what would I do? Or I really love cheese. So and I really dislike those kinds of excuses, because there is the idea of like going as vegan as you can. If you
Hmm.
know that this is so destructive and you know that it's not as good as for your health, and you know that the animals, who, if anyone who knows an animal, I'm gesturing over here because I've got these two cuties sitting by me on the bed, these two dogs. Like, that they feel so many things that we wouldn't want them to feel, that intense pain and sadness and
Hmm.
fear and suffering. And so I really, I just sort of dislike that idea that you have to like go perfectly vegan, because there's many ways in which you can head in that direction. And many people like yourself are an example of sort of like getting your way there eventually.
Yeah, absolutely. And it takes time. And I'm the only vegan in my household.
Right.
Your whole family's vegan, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So
I
yeah,
feel
so
very lucky.
that's great. Yeah, for me, and that was one of the things that held me back too, which is going to be we're going to talk about more when we talk about myths and like success tips and everything like that. But maybe this is like a kind of like a good segue since I'm already talking about it. I'm like thinking out loud here. But yeah, that was like a big fear for me was I want
Right.
to do this for myself, but the people around me aren't going to want to change. So
Right.
I just started focusing on myself, and then when I was ready to commit, I was like, okay, how am I going to make this work for me? And so, my family's still not vegan, and that's fine. There's less non-vegan consumed in my house as a
And sure.
household because of the switch. And my husband and son, they also feel better not having a lot of dairy, so they'll have my almond milk. We don't even buy regular milk. So there's like those little impacts about it. I used to worry about, oh my God, how am I going to be able to, like, when I go to other people's houses and then the judgment,
Right.
right? The judgment.
Right.
And this is part
Right.
of that people pleasing work that I've done on myself all these years
Right. Right.
is I want to live this lifestyle for me, and I'm letting the opinions of others stop me. And I really didn't want that to be a factor. So then I had to figure, well, how can I make this work for me?
Right. Right.
And so that was what I did. And so when I do go to like if I do get invited over to a family member's house for a Sabbath meal or for another holiday meal, and they're not vegan, I just bring a main dish to share, and I make a dessert, and I
Mm-hmm.
share something, and they're welcome to have it. And usually people make stuff for me as well, but I don't expect it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'm just always prepared that way.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Your hesitation on going vegan, I was going to say, it reminds me of the being a recovered, if I can out you on that, you taught me that term, but like being a recovered people pleaser, or is that what you call it? Recovered?
Yeah, I'm a recovered people pleaser. Yeah,
Yeah.
recovering
And so,
people
I mean,
pleaser.
and recovering, yeah, that's probably the better way to phrase it. I think that because people pleasers do what's sort of expected to them, but by everyone else, what everyone else expects of you. So also taking that step to say like, nope, this doesn't work for me anymore. I feel better when I don't eat it, and now I know more about how destructive and harmful it is, and so I'm not going to eat it anymore. That's like part of you owning yourself, your truth, your reality. And I love that. I mean, I think that that's something that's a goal for a lot of women, of our generation, to get to that stage, to do what's right for you and what feels good for you. And so I'm so happy for you that you got there and you figured out a way to make it work.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I want to find a way. That's why I was so excited when we connected, because I
Totally.
want to start talking about that more, talking
Yes.
about veganism, but even beyond that, it's the making a change for yourself
Mm-hmm.
that feels good for you, that supports
Mm-hmm.
who you are, whatever that
Mm-hmm.
might be.
Mm-hmm.
And despite what the people around you are doing. And yes, you can respect what they're doing, but people need to respect what you're doing.
Absolutely.
and
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 one
if
of the
people, oh
things
yeah.
that people, oh, sorry for interrupting you.
Oh, that's okay. No, I was just going to say, and if people can't respect the choices you want to make for yourself, then it's time to revisit those, what role do those people play in your life? So yeah.
Absolutely. And I would say, I would go even further than that to say, like, this is a choice you're making for yourself, but also it has really beautiful and gentle and positive and compassionate gifts that you're putting out into the world. So it's not only like, I just eat this way and that's me and that's it. And you have no right to judge me. Also, like, people should admire you. You're making a statement here of saying, like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be a part of that destructiveness. And I really care about animals and other living beings. And I want to be a part of our climate solutions and our global warming solutions and our pollution solutions. I mean, eating a plant-based diet helps all those things. And so truthfully, it's very admirable, as we talked about before too. You're also like bravely going against the grain. Like, that's not an easy thing to do. It's
Mhm.
much easier to do what everyone else is doing, but you're being really brave and saying, like, I know what's right for me and what's right for the planet, and this is what I'm doing. And I think that's to be admired.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I
Yeah,
it wasn't easy, but there's certain things that help to make it easier, which we're going to talk about some of those things.
yeah,
And what I
yeah,
really want to dive into now is talking about the top vegan myths, because I feel like there's a lot of vegan myths out there.
for sure, for
And I
sure.
wrote down a list of some, and then when after we go through this list, if there's any others that you want to add, feel free. But the first one I want to touch on is the not enough protein myth. I feel like that is one a lot of people
Yes.
like to say.
Yes. Well, I've done a lot of research on this, and what my research tells me is that everyone is getting enough or too much protein these days because of a lot of those diets, like, the Atkins diet or whatever, that encourage so much protein. People are eating so much of it and often getting too much, and it's actually not a good thing in too high of a quantity. um and if you're a person that eats and isn't malnourished, you're generally getting enough protein. So a lot of people who live in the United States who have ready access to food have enough protein. Most vegans are not protein deficient. The other confusion around this too is that people don't realize that there's protein in not only in animal meat, right? And people don't realize that. Like, if you go to Chipotle, which happens to be one of our favorite, I hardly ever go, but just quick burrito or salad bar Mexican, food places, you go and you're like, I'll have the rice and I'll have the beans and I'll have the guacamole and I'll have the lettuce and I'll have the salsa and all the corn. It's a beautiful bowl in my book. And when you're going along, they go, and no protein, because you're not asking for the steak or chicken or pork or whatever. And the ridiculous thing, and of course I don't say anything because these are like 17-year-old workers, like, there's so much protein in there because I'm having rice mixed with black beans, mixed with guacamole, avocado. But it's like, protein is animal protein. So many
Mhm.
people just believe that. I mean, that's what they say when you're going along and ordering, and it drives me nuts, because that meal is filled with protein. So that's also a misconception too, that you can get protein from so many different sources, even the vegetables that people don't know it exists in. And the easiest way to explain it, the film The Game Changers, which is available on Netflix, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but they explain it really well. And that basically there's protein in meat because the animals eat the vegetables and the grains and the oats that provide them
Ah.
with protein. So in many ways, it's just like, let go of the middleman, so to speak, and eat those foods directly yourself. The other thing that I was going to say is that a lot of studies have shown that, like, red meat, for example, is a carcinogen. So in my talks, I say there's so many healthier forms of protein, like beans and nuts, that have no connection to cancer the way that some of the meat products do. So if you're going for protein, go for those.
Absolutely. And I agree with everything you just said. One film that was also very helpful for me was The Forks Over Knives, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because
Mm-hmm.
they really show the carcinogens and just the
Right.
impact that all these foods have on our arteries, on our blood
Right.
sugar, on just everything. And it's that old condition, it's that old narrative, that old paradigm
Right.
on what nutrition is. And as maybe this was information formed based on what people knew at a specific time.
I
And a
think it.
lot has been learned
Mhm.
since then, but it's just hard to change old ways.
That talk I was telling you about, where that doctor said that beautiful thing about being proud to be vegan for all the reasons, One of the other speakers talked about like the history of meat eating, and I wish I knew the details, but he basically credited it to this guy in like the late 1800s who said that like something like children can't grow up if they're not eating enough chicken or dead, he didn't say this part, but like dead animals. And that has been basically the thinking from then. And I just think, my gosh, if this person was alive today and he knew that his words were held on to in the way they were, and it made us make factory farms so we could kill as many animals as quickly as possible in the worst conditions possible, just because we need dead animals to eat for protein, I think he would be astounded to know what he caused. But yeah, the information is old and it's been proven to be untrue, but it's very, very slow to get new information. It's so hard to change big systems. And many people also like have that willful ignorance, like they don't want to hear because they really like eating their meat. And that's hard.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's such a wide variety of things. You have your tofu, you have, quinoa, which is a grain that has
Mm-hmm,
protein.
mm-hmm,
There's certain vegetables like leafy greens that have
mm-hmm,
protein in it. And then of course your beans and your nuts and your seeds,
mm-hmm.
all of those things. And I also learned about protein early on in my like we do eat too much of it. There's this like belief that we need like all this protein, and you can get enough of that in a
Mm-hmm.
much healthier and balanced way, and it just feels better on the body. At
It
least I can
does.
speak from my own experience anyway.
It,
it,
yeah,
it
for
feels better
sure.
in the body.
I mean, just like the thing I said about milk, I've met very few people who said, like, I went vegan and I regret it. Most people say, like, I wish I'd done it earlier, because not only does it feel good for just that health and that, but it also feels good, like, ethically, morally, and spiritually, right? Like, you're following a lifestyle that is arguably one of the gentlest ways to live on this earth.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then, secondary to the not enough protein myth is the vitamin deficiencies.
Mm-hmm.
There's this like fear that you're not going to get enough iron, you're not going to get enough, other vitamins and minerals and nutrients. What can you offer on that myth?
I mean, I think from all the studies I've done, the really legitimate concern is B12, that
Mhm.
vegans don't get enough of it. But really, from what I've heard, meat eaters also don't get enough of it. And it's because we're using so many pesticides in different ways to clean the soil. It's a bacteria that you need. And so, really, most people in the United States should be taking a B12 supplement, which is just really easy to do. And so, I would not, let that be an excuse or a barrier. The rest of it, if you're eating a beautifully differentiated plate every day with different things on it, that are different colors, you are getting enough of the nutrients. And again, that same argument for protein is true for like iron, for example, because animals eat those leafy greens and then it's converted to iron in their meat. But you can get it directly from those plant-based sources. And there are things like non-dairy milks that are fortified with B12 and stuff like that, just because they know that a lot of vegans are consuming those. It's so easy to just take a supplement a couple times a week. So I would not let that be a worry to you. And otherwise, if you're eating a diverse, beautiful plate, you're getting everything you need.
Absolutely. Yeah, and nutritional yeast is like another ingredient, which it's kind of
Vegans love, and it's often fortified with B12.
yeah, absolutely. And those who are not familiar with that, it's like cheese powder. It looks like cheese powder.
Mm-hmm.
And it's used in a lot of like vegan recipes that would include
Like
cheese.
add cheesy. Yep.
Yeah, and it just adds a lot of amazing flavor to things. I use it like all the time. I go through a lot of nutritional yeast.
It's such a delicious product. I'm totally with you on that. Absolutely.
So yeah, so that's like another way to um incorporate that.
And like I said, I think most people are a little deficient on B12 and should be taking a supplement because of the way that we, make everything so clean nowadays that it's
Mhm.
washing it away.
Right, because it's
And
it's
I
not.
think I even read, I have to remember this, but I'm pretty sure I read that even animals are given supplements because they're not
Oh
getting
wow.
enough of it either. So
Because it
then
has to
that's
do with
why.
soil, right? It's like a
Mhm.
bacteria that's in the soil, and that's where it comes from,
Right,
right?
right.
Wow. Yeah, and then the next big myth is that the limited food options,
Hmm.
which I have found to be the complete opposite because when I discovered all the food options was when I stopped eating dairy. So I started
100%.
looking up vegan recipes because I figured that was an easy way to get dairy-free recipes. And I'm looking at all these amazing, flavorful dishes, colorful, because we like to eat with our eyes too, right? We're very visual.
Absolutely.
And
Yes.
and so when I started seeing all these options, I just started making vegan recipes, like not just I start, desserts are fun, but then I started making the other stuff too,
Right.
just because it sounded really delicious.
Right. I have a friend who describes it this way, and I really love this. He said, when I was an omnivore, there was like one kind of milk in the fridge, bunch of cellophane wrapped, sort of like pink flesh, and that was kind of it. That was like, and maybe like pasta or whatever, rice. So very, very similar every day. And he said, now that I'm a vegan, there's like 5 different kinds of milk in my fridge because you've got macadamia and you've got oat and you've got soy, there's so much. And my fridge is like a rainbow. I never knew about, all these leafy greens and red and peppers and beets. And there's just so much more variety. And now that, he knows that it's not just white rice or white pasta, right? There's quinoa, there's all these other grains. And so the truth is, I think vegans are some of the most creative and exciting eaters out there, because this is a myth that we didn't talk about, but I feel like people sort of think like vegans are like, I just like a bowl of lettuce and that's all I ever want to eat. And that is the farthest thing from the truth. I want to eat really good food that's delicious and flavorful. And so we are making that happen, because it used to be that it was just a bowl of lettuce. Like when I was a 6-year-old kid and I went vegetarian, that's kind of what I'd be handed at a restaurant. But I think vegans are very, very creative in many ways. There's so much more out there for us, and it just like opens up so many avenues, and there's so many different flavors that we get to try. So I think it's exactly the opposite that is true. You might have to work at it a little bit more. You might have to learn a new way of doing things. You might have to learn a new way of shopping, watch a couple videos, or to even take a class. But at the end of the day, vegans probably eat a lot more different things in the week than, an omnivore who's sort of like potato or rice, chicken breast, and like
Hmm.
maybe a salad or something.
Absolutely. And, just looking at stuff on Pinterest was what piqued my
Yes.
interest even more in a vegan
Yes.
lifestyle. So if you're
Mhm.
someone who's vegan curious, just look at all of the different things on Pinterest. Like I love desserts and
Mhm.
just
Me
finding
too.
healthier versions of desserts. You can make your cheesecakes, you can make your cookies, you can and yes, there's still a sometimes food, but the ingredients are better that go in these.
Absolutely.
Especially a lot of the
Absolutely.
whole food ingredients that
Hmm.
you're making a treat that's less harmful for you. And and
Absolutely.
so that, that's an easy way to start into veganism is just try desserts.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I like to say in some of the presentations I do is that so much of food is how you prepare it, right?
Hmm.
So like the raw chicken breast, I mean, I haven't had the, like ever, or like in like 50 years or whatever, 44 years, like is gross. It doesn't taste good, right? But it tastes good presumably because the way you've sauteed it and braised it and let it marinate or whatever, and then the way you cooked it. Well, you can use those same flavors and those same marinades with vegetable based products, either
Hmm.
tofu or a lot of mushrooms. Or I know the claims to fame in our house are that we make like fish out of non-fish, so we've made salmon out of carrots. You
Oh,
really,
wow.
from what I understand, you cut the thick slabs of carrots and you basically do the same thing as they would to make lox. It's like roasted in salt, and then you let it marinate in this like oily, smoky stuff. And I mean, I've never had lox, but like that's how it smells. That's how lox smells. And like we've made spicy tuna. You take the outer part of the tomato, which has that same thickness and that red,
Hmm.
and you basically marinated it in the same thing I think the tuna would be. And then by the time you put it on rice and wrap it in seaweed and you're making spicy tuna rolls, it tastes the same. And so that is like my mission, is to teach people like it doesn't have to be a bowl of lettuce, and it doesn't have to be boring, and it doesn't even have to mean saying goodbye to the flavors you love or the taste you love or the memories, the food that has memories. It's honoring what you now know based on what I've taught you about the destructiveness of the animal agriculture industry. And so how can you, now that you know this, how can you participate in fighting, in moving us towards a better place, but yet at the same time still enjoy your food, your flavors, your taste, your recipes. And many people just don't know that. They just don't think about it. You think this food is so good, and it's only good because of how you cooked it. And you can, I mean, most, mushrooms don't have much of a flavor in some cases, or tomatoes certainly don't, but you cook it in the same thing and it's fabulous.
Absolutely. And it's so true. The seasonings, the marinades, the sauces, all of that is what really
Right.
makes the dish. One of my favorite stir fry ingredients is chickpeas. I love like
100%.
doing like, like sweet and sour chickpeas or like,
Oh my gosh,
sesame
that sounds
chickpeas
so
instead of
good.
sesame
Yes.
chicken and
Yes.
putting it with some I mean, chickpeas are like one
Mm.
of my top go-to
We
like
cannot keep them around this house. We just pop through them so fast. I'm absolutely with
they're
you on that.
so versatile and yeah,
Absolutely.
and so there's definitely no limit on
Right.
foods and if
Have you ever bought or heard of liquid smoke? It's
what's
the
that?
best thing. It's liquid smoke.
Oh, I've seen it.
Uh,
I use a lot of smoked paprika for like
so,
my
oh
smoky
yeah, it's
stuff.
kind of like that. I mean, we use a lot of smoked paprika too, but liquid smoke is one of the things that makes the carrots turn into like lox. Oh my
Uh-huh.
gosh, it's just amazing. And it's what a great item. I've actually made tofu bacon out of it before too. It adds just such a smoky flavor. It's
Mm.
delicious.
And much healthier than real bacon too, because
Absolutely.
yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
And then, I feel like I talk so much about vegan food because that's a topic that excites me. But another common myth is it's too expensive.
Hmm.
And and that, that really depends also on what you buy. Like any food can be too expensive.
Hmm.
There's the processed,
Hmm.
Beyond Burgers and your
Hmm.
vegan cheeses that, are pricey, but you can make a lot of your own stuff. I mean, beans, legumes, rice, quinoa, tofu, all those things are not very expensive ingredients.
You froze for a little bit, but
Oh,
I don't know if it was on my end or on your end, but you were asking about, oh, it's my end because now I have something popping up saying my internet is unstable. You were asking about the myth of people saying it's really expensive, right?
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was saying that that's like the processed foods, like the Beyond
Yeah.
Burgers and the vegan cheeses, and there's like a lot
Yeah.
of prepackaged things that can be pricey. But a lot of the stuff like quinoa, rice, beans, legumes,
Yeah.
nuts, all those things, pasta,
Yeah.
those things are cheap.
I saw somewhere that actually vegans end up spending less on food per year because at the end of the day, we are buying a lot of vegetables and beans and rice and potatoes. And those things are very, very filling, can make a delicious meal, and are not as expensive as some of the meat products. I think why people say it's so expensive is because if you have like a Snickers bar next to some like vegan equivalent of a Snickers bar, it's going to be like 150 versus $3 or whatever. And
Mhm.
it's like, oh wow, being vegan is so expensive. But that really is for a lot of those specialty products, which I appreciate those specialty products.
Yeah,
I
me
think if
too.
you're someone who can afford it and you want to head in the direction of veganism, but you're worried about like your family's once a month Sunday burger night, switch to Beyond Burgers. You know what? They are supposed to taste the same. I can't verify that because I haven't had a burger in so long, but I mean, from my perspective, they do. By the time you dress them up and put them in a bun, it's that same flavor and texture you're used to. And while they're not a health food by any means, they're probably healthier from the standpoint as there's no cholesterol in them. No cows are involved. And they also use the numbers I always get mixed up in my head, but it's like 97% less land to grow a burger and
Mhm.
92% less water, or vice versa. So if you just want to start moving in the direction, those items can be really helpful for getting you there. And arguably, it's just such a better step to take. They're not a health food, just like your meat burger is not a health food either, but they are so much better for the planet and the environment. And of course, there's no cow involved. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah.
And also making a veggie burger at home, it can be like this. There's a lot of fancy recipes out there, but I can now that kind of like a great way to transition to vegan is think about the things you eat normally and replace the non-vegan
100%.
ingredients with the vegan ingredients. And
Yes.
so if there's a burger recipe that you like, you replace the meat with, pick your vegan protein, and you, instead of using egg, you can use oh my goodness, flax seeds, like ground
Yep.
flaxseed to hold it together, oats.
Yep.
Usually, if I'm really lazy, I'll take a can of black beans, a cup of oats, and like some various seasonings and some corn and slap it together and bake it in the oven. And then I have my own black bean burgers.
Absolutely. I after one of my presentations, someone said, like, I really want to move in this direction, but I don't know how. And what I realized is that people think like we just eat totally differently than I do. And so what I put together, and be happy to share with you if you want to share it, is like, here's how you could eat in a week for dinner. So if you had
Mm.
a pasta bolognese night, how about switching to this lentil bolognese recipe? You're basically eating the same meal that y'all love to eat on Monday nights, but instead of having beef crumbles in there, you're having lentil in there. Healthier, better for the planet, but same flavors and textures. Okay, so if you have like a taco bar night in your house, here's some ways you could, like, switch that up a little bit. There are some plant-based, ground beef products that are, like crumbles, but you can also do the same thing by crumbling up walnuts. And then by the time you cook them with Mexican spices and seasonings, that tastes like a Mexican ground beef in a tortilla with lettuce, tomato, avocado, salsa, whatever, onions, cilantro. It tastes like the same thing. So I put that together so they could see, like, I eat the same things you do each week. I just have shifted the recipes a little bit so that
Mhm.
there's no animal products in them. But at the end of the day, I'm having the taco bar night, I'm having the pasta night, I'm having the stir fry night. And so I think that could be really helpful too.
Absolutely. And also, like, I started cooking a lot of Indian food when I became vegan because there's so
Mm,
many recipes.
and it's so
So
fabulous.
good and it's so
Yes.
flavorful. And
Yes.
it's just, yeah, there's definitely no limit, and it doesn't have to be expensive. Just like if you're not a
No,
vegan, that can be expensive too. It all
for
really
sure.
depends on what you put in your cart.
No,
And
I mean, I really did read an article that said vegans do save money at the end of the day. The other thing I like to say is that if you're concerned about the planet or the environment, most of us can't put solar panels on our roofs or buy a new
Mhm.
electric car. But many of us who live in this country and have access to different grocery stores can change what we put on our plates without any upfront investment. And you can do it as soon as starting tomorrow. And so that's something that I like to remind people of as well, is that this is a really good way to fight climate change and fight global warming. And it's something that's more accessible to all of us. The other thing I do feel that we should state is that the reason why meat and dairy is so much less expensive is because it's heavily subsidized by the government. So the
Mhm.
price that is it's put for in the grocery stores is not the actual cost. I mean, the cost is tremendous because of how much food and water has had to go into feeding that animal, to then grows really quickly and then is killed to become food. So the cost is tremendous, not to mention, of course, the health and environmental cost. But the government, because they've invested so much money into factory farmings, into factory farms, they subsidize it. So it makes it cheaper so that people go for it and get it.
Mhm.
So the problem is that vegan products are just being charged the actual cost without the subsidies. And then of course there's the issue too of like just quantity. I mean, vegan products are just made in a smaller scale because not as many people are vegan yet as are not vegan.
But there's definitely a lot of more options. Uh-oh. All right, we're back. I had to plug in my computer because I didn't want it to die in the middle of our conversation.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. I need to get like a please stand by slide to like put up.
You'll become like a real studio.
There you go, exactly. But yeah, I wanted to just follow up with what you were saying about the environment. Um, there's also a lot of land, which I didn't realize too, and that leads to like deforestation as well, because you have to chop down forests, you got to create all this space for all these
Yeah.
cows, and
Yeah.
so there's a lot of destruction
Yeah.
involved with meat farming.
Animal agriculture is just the most inefficient way to feed people because it uses so much land and so much water, and it provides so much less food than the food that they were eating. So if we just fed the people the food that we were feeding to the animals, we would have no hunger or starvation in the world. We'd be able to feed like 4 billion additional people. So it's very, very devastating. And many people, I think, avoid really understanding this or embracing this. I know that most people were watching in horror in about 3 years ago when the Amazon rainforest was burning down. And the
Mm-hmm.
reason why it was on fire is because the land was being deforested to make room for cattle to graze. And so this is just such a horrendously inefficient and destructive industry. And it's hard for people like you and me who are already living this way because you hear so many people talk about how concerned they are about the environment and global warming, and then they just don't connect it to the one thing they do like 3 to 5 times a day that they could maybe make some changes or shifts in.
Absolutely. Yeah, and again, just even if someone doesn't want to become fully vegan, but like, Meatless Monday has been a trend that's been around recently.
Absolutely.
And so even any way that you can do less helps
Mm-hmm.
helps the situation.
It helps hugely.
However you can take action, can
Absolutely.
absolutely help. Another myth I want to touch on is that vegans are difficult because we're always thinking about veganism. So, what are your thoughts on that?
So I feel like it's like we're still what we've become so politically correct in like in TV shows. We don't generally make fun of any demographic anymore. And I'm, a fan of that. I do think the ways in which the shows that I grew up watching in the 90s used to make fun of things is probably inappropriate. And I'm glad we've moved away from that. But I feel like that hasn't happened for vegans. We're still like the butt of the jokes. I mean, I can't tell you how many sitcoms that I watch, when I'm just cooking dinner or whatever, and the husband says to the wife, "Wait, whose house are we going to dinner at? Oh, theirs. Oh, they're the vegan family. Oh, thanks for letting me know. I'll eat before I go." Ha 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 ha. And things like that all the time, and it's still okay. I was just meeting with someone the other day who lives in England, and she was telling me about how in England vegans have become a protected class, just like a race
Wow.
and a gender, where you can't be, and that's probably because they are the butt of the jokes, or they're ostracized from things at work, or food isn't provided for them, where you wouldn't, you would hopefully have food that was appropriate for someone that followed halal or kosher. Well, like that vegans are in that same category. I don't know exactly all that entails, but I do think it's because vegans are ridiculed still and made fun of, and it's super permissible. I've rarely seen a TV show, popular culture, where there's a vegan where it's good and a good role model, and where they're not made fun of. But the other thing I would say, there's that joke of like, how do you know someone's vegan? Don't worry, within the first minute you meet them, they'll tell you or whatever. And I think that that's kind of a silly thing to say, just because people who are passionate about something, like if someone's really into like playing poker or whatever, or really into pickleball. I mean, you also hear about that within the first 5 minutes, like you're getting to know them. But since it doesn't carry any potential conflict within you, like you don't get annoyed that they're talking about pickleball. You're just like, oh, that's Tom, and he really loves pickleball and he talks about it all the time. But it doesn't impact you. Whereas vegans are causing people, hopefully, to think. And most people have this huge, cognitive dissonance where they love animals and they have animals in their life that they love, and they love to share videos of like the cute squirrels chasing each other or whatever it is, or the squirrel who's best friends with the chicken, or there's so many videos and people love it. And they also eat animals, and they pay for this horrible destructiveness towards animals. So I think that's where people are so resistant, and like it makes them want to make fun of it or put up this wall or this barrier. But like I said, I mean, we are just really trying to advocate for those who don't have words the way that we do to advocate for themselves. And I think being an activist, advocating for other people is such an admirable thing to be. Every activist I've ever met, I'm super, awed by and super impressed by. And this one is just a little bit harder because people realize when we're talking about advocating for animals and not eating them, that they're doing the thing that we are saying we should stop, we should lay off. It's really causing a lot of harm and destructiveness. So it's a defense mechanism.
Yeah, you brought up a lot of good points. It's so true. Like anything that someone's passionate about, if someone's a dancer, that's what
Right.
they're going to talk about. right? If
Right.
someone is passionate about sports, right? You're passionate about football, you're passionate about baseball, you're
Right.
going to talk about your team, you're going to talk about the game, right?
Right. Right.
And when you become a vegan, you're very passionate about it. And I
Right.
think you're right in that, yeah, it's because it can touch some nerves when you know share that information.
For
People
sure.
automatically feel like they're being judged. When I share with people that I'm vegan, I'm not judging them for not
And
being
I
vegan.
will say, more often than not, they're the ones who ask you all the questions. They're like, oh, that's all she talked about. They're like, why? Well, why did you make that decision? And then they like to do things like, well, what if your neighbor had a cow in their backyard and you could see how, they love to throw out these dumb examples that are just so unrealistic for most of us who live in cities. And, well, what about your kids? And I used to like to say they treat us like we're a doctor, nutritionist, priest, ethicist, rabbi. I mean, we are just people who learned more about the destructiveness of this industry and how it's not necessary for our health and longevity and well-being. And in many cases, when you eat it, many people are eating too much of it. So it's actually detracting from their health and longevity and well-being. And so we're trying to live a different life. And truthfully, they ask me more questions than I ask them. If they want to talk about it, I'm happy to. And now, of course, I'm employed in this industry and it's my job to go speak about it, but I'm asked to do so. When I'm just meeting people, I'm happy to talk about what's your favorite hiking spot and
Mhm.
whatever, what's your favorite band or whatever.
Yeah, it's we have other passions besides being vegan, but I know for me, I think one of the things that I get excited about it because I learned about all these delicious things that you can eat, especially again with the desserts. And
Right.
whenever I've met non-vegan friends who want to check out a vegan restaurant with well they're willing to try out vegan restaurant, they're
Right.
all amazed by the desserts because the
Of
desserts
course.
do not taste they taste better. Some of them think they taste better
For
like
sure.
than the non-vegan, like vegan cheesecake, for example. There's
Mm-hmm.
this place in Brooklyn, they make really good vegan cheesecake
Wow.
and it doesn't like it's not heavy on your stomach like real
Right.
cheesecake is, right? It's
Right.
like made out of
Right.
tofu, and because tofu is takes on whatever flavors you mix it on with,
That's
tofu
right.
makes amazing quiche, it makes amazing cheesecake.
That's right.
So I'm very passionate about food and recipes and doing things that are better for you. And
Right.
so that's where I get excited. And so like if people are foodies, then it's easy to like talk about that stuff with them. But
Yeah, I think foodies get it because they do get that there's so much amazing stuff you can do with vegetables. It's I think people who are just used to their more limited diet that they would worry like, well, what do you eat? I have like chicken for lunch and dinner, and of course, there's so much else out there.
absolutely. Well, this was great. Any other myths before we jump over to success tips?
Um, I can't think of any other myths. I mean, I know there's a lot out there. Well, I guess I will say that I think people think you have to cook for yourself, and they're like, that's exhausting. I'm always on the run, and I like to pick stuff up. And I would challenge that as a myth. I think there's a lot of ways to go where you can get vegan food on the run. It's gotten a lot easier nowadays. Of course, where you are and where I am, you're in a big city in New York, and I'm in Austin, which happens to be a very vegan friendly city, even though we're in Texas. It is easier, but also, I mentioned Chipotle earlier, and you can get anything there with the no protein, which again is a myth in itself, and grab something on the go. So I think that's a myth that people have that's just not accurate. And you don't always have to cook for yourself. If you're not someone who loves to cook, you don't need to. But I would argue that it's really fun, and it's certainly a culinary adventure. And for me, like that's become such a hobby of mine. I absolutely love to create delicious vegan things and then
Mhm.
invite people over to try them. Like it's so fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I enjoy the same thing, either inviting people over or when I go to someone's house and they're like, "Oh, wow, this is vegan." Like
And
It's
like
always
and
a
you
great
brought up
comment.
for sure. And you brought up earlier, like, will I be able to go to the friends and family and whatever? And I think there's this idea that that's going to be really, really difficult or really hard. And I would say, I don't think it is. I think this is becoming so much more commonplace. If you
Mhm.
tell people you're doing this because you learn more, or you're doing this because you realize that it's healthier for you, or you feel better when you eat this way, like if they're your real friends, they're going to be supportive. And you've come up with some solutions. Like people are always saying, like, if you could bring a salad or you could bring, and so you're just bringing a little bit more than that, and it's worked out well for you. And in many ways you're exposing more people to plant-based lifestyles and to veganism, because they're getting to try what you brought for yourself. And you still want to socialize, you still want to see all your friends.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you for bringing that point up. That is a very good point to add to that. So, I wanted to talk about some success tips, and we've shared some of them kind of like in our conversation. So, some of them might be repetitive, but kind of just to reiterate. And the first one I want to bring up is the ingredient swaps. Like,
Yes.
what a great way to start being vegan is just look at what you already eat. And like you were saying about the lentil bolognese or like anything, there's
The walnut meat for your taco bar, right?
walnut, right? There's so many things. Tacos are easy to make vegan. Pancakes are easy to make vegan. I made a
100%.
lot, and they taste just like any other pancakes. So.
They by the time you're griddling, a liquidy, floury substance and putting it on the griddle and then putting bananas and syrup on it, it's delicious, even without the one egg that the recipe called for or whatever.
And then I like to get fancy and pull out the vegan whipped cream and then, make it like an
Then it's
IHOP
amazing.
situation.
Right, right. Then it's even more amazing.
Then it's even more amazing. Yeah, and I think especially now, it's so easier to be vegan
Right,
um,
right,
than
right.
than it used to be.
Right. Well, what I used to say, so like I've been doing this for so long that I used to take all my old favorite recipes and do those tips and swaps that you are
Hmm.
kind of asking about. And you can. I mean, if you have like a beloved banana bread recipe and it calls for 2 eggs and that's the only non-vegan thing, you could learn how to use flax seeds as eggs, which are called flags, and it's really easy. And in many ways, it'll end up making the same product. But what I've found is like food chemistry, like recipes are like really designed to work well with each other and have been tried and tried and tested over the years. And so I've gotten to the point now that there's so many vegan recipe creators out there, and I've started to kind of put my toes into the water and being one myself because I'm such an avid cook, that I would just search for a vegan recipe at this point. So I would just like, I like to make banana bread weekly for my kids. They take slices in the morning as they're rushing to get ready for school or whatever. Just
Mm.
find a vegan banana bread recipe and switch to that, because the numbers and the quantities and the ratios are going to work together better than if you switched out an ingredient. It's not impossible to switch out the ingredient. And if you're so attached to your old recipe, you can. And there are swaps for eggs. And of course, for milk, there's just non-dairy milks. And for butter, of course, there's, vegan butter is so easily available, or you can do like a lot of people will switch to coconut oil and that kind of thing. But I mean, there are so many amazing vegan recipe creators out there. And I would advocate that you look for the ones that are really highly ranked, because that means that like hundreds of people have tried that recipe and said it worked out really well. Because some of them don't have any ranking. And then I'm worried. And I know that baking something and having it not come together is such a disappointment. And
Hmm.
you bought expensive ingredients. And so I would say find some ones. And then for me, I've found ones that are tried and true. And those are the sites that I use all the time, because I've never had a fail with their sites. It does take some learning, like no doubt there's a learning curve, but it is not
Absolutely.
impossible. And I would argue at the end of the day, you're going to probably be happy and wish you'd come this direction sooner. And you're going to have so many delicious foods that you used to like. You've just, switched ingredients a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely would like to share some of your favorite recipe creators because in the
Okay.
links below this video.
That'd be
So real
great.
quick, what are some of your top favorite recipe creators?
So I have the ones I go to all the time are It Doesn't Taste Like Chicken,
Hmm.
Hot for Food, and Loving It Vegan. Those are like my three favorites. I also really like From Estes Kitchen. I mean, and if you can't find any of these links, I can provide you. And I also really like Shane and Simple.
Oh, I've never heard of any of those sites.
Oh my gosh.
I will
So
have to check those out. I'll add some of
please
my.
do.
I discovered one. I discovered her, I think, in December. Mina Rome, and she has a great YouTube channel where she just makes easy stuff, and she's done tours. Like I found her because she did a New York City vegan tour. She's from Germany, and then she did one in Paris. So she does like a lot of like travel and shows you like places to go. But her recipes are so easy,
Amazing.
and she's just very relaxing to watch. And she just came out with her own cookbook, which I got, and it's so very easy on it.
Amazing.
There's another one that I got that was also very easy, and it's like slipping my mind. So I'll add that in the link below. And
I
then
will.
yeah.
I was going to tell you another one I thought of, and then also wanted to share some favorite YouTubers as well that you brought that up because I think that is such a legitimate and fabulous way to learn how to switch your cooking.
Hmm.
So there's a woman who lives in Austin, and she has the Bittersweet vlog, and she has great recipes as well. And then in terms of YouTube, I love watching Sweet Simple Vegan and the Edgy Veg. They are both
Oh,
fabulous, and I would highly recommend if you are thinking like, I want to learn how to cook and I don't know how, and I don't know that I want to spend hundreds of dollars on a class, like just watch some of those folks. And, the videos are like 8 minutes. If you're someone who like to make a really creamy, like fettuccine Alfredo, all of them have a vegan one, and you watch them do it and you're like, I never knew that I could take some cashews and puree them, and then put garlic and whatever the other flavorings that you would put in a fettuccine Alfredo, and it tastes the same way. So those are your teachers, and those can be your real allies and helpers, and it's free. It's so incredible, and that's a lot of how I've become such an avid cook, is that we watch so many vegan YouTubers. And
yeah.
the great thing about YouTube is if you're watching one, it'll take you to a next one, and next one,
Oh
so
yeah,
you'll
you can
learn of
just
ones.
totally go on a loop.
You'll learn
I
of
yeah.
ones. Oh, there is another one called Young Man Cooking. He's amazing
Oh,
on YouTube as well. Young, I think it's Yeung or Yueng. He
okay.
mostly does Asian food, and it's delicious. Not only Asian, but mostly.
Very cool. Thank you for sharing that. Yes, because it's almost like watching the Food Network when you start watching. I mean, I want to add one of my favorites to watch is the Vegan Zombie. He's a lot of fun.
Yep.
If you watched him, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
he does a variety of recipes, but he'll also go into stores and show you like the latest products, and
Yes.
he's just a lot of fun to watch. Um, and then Gaz Oakley, he's another.
Amazing.
I love him. I could just watch him all day.
So
He's
amazing. I
funny.
think I think he's probably, I mean, of course, I've never gotten to taste anything of his, but I think he's probably a tremendously good chef because he is just so talented from what it seems in the video.
Someone gifted me a cookbook of his a long time ago, and that's how I discovered him.
He's
And
amazing.
yeah, I wouldn't mind getting one of his other cookbooks, and he's just a lot of fun to watch. So if you're someone who just likes to watch food,
Hmm.
but yeah, he's very like fun and passionate and just very visual. So yeah, I'll definitely include links to our favorite YouTubers and other
Amazing.
vegan resources for you viewers who would like to check that all out. Um, and then the next thing which we gathered, which we talked about before, was navigating social gatherings, which we did touch on before. But yeah, it's always important to communicate with the host, and just say, what can I bring, or if there's like a specific thing they would like you to bring, and if they're up for whatever, then just say, okay, I'll bring this. And I always bring a dessert and
Because
then
you're
a
going to want to
main.
eat dessert, and often the desserts aren't vegan, but a lot of the
Exactly.
sides, and yep. I think it's great. The other thing I always say when people say like, what is something I should know when going vegan, because I've been meaning to and I want to, and help me. One of the things I always say is you need a vegan community. And
Mhm.
so that is available for you online, virtually, for sure. But you and I were talking just earlier tonight before we started officially recording how much you enjoyed like just being in this virtual vegan community. There's something really, really liberating about it, and very
Mhm.
comforting being around people who've made the similar choices to you, that are choosing to live life this way, that are choosing not to go along with the mainstream. And so if you don't have it locally, find it online. There are millions of groups to be in with people who can support you. And then
Absolutely.
hopefully you can find it locally, because there's nothing like just going to a potluck with a bunch of vegans, because you can eat everything that's there. And people, as we talked about earlier, people aren't going, well, why? Well, what if your neighbor had that cow in the backyard and you could watch it, stuff
Oh
like
my
that.
God.
So
Yeah,
I mean, one person
exactly.
did say that to me. More often than not, they say, what if your neighbors had chickens and you could see the way the eggs, what's the problem with it? But I did have someone ask me the cow one once. But, it's just it's when you're doing something that's different and you're going against the mainstream, it helps to have community. There's
Mhm.
loads of it virtually and online, which is now that we've had COVID. By the way, thank you very much, coming from a human consumption of an animal. But virtual is much more legitimate and accepted as a way of bonding, and it's great. But obviously, like, having those friends locally too is really rewarding, and it's just fun to have vegan potluck groups or go try different restaurants together. It's nice to be around people who are doing what you're doing, because we're not in the mainstream yet at all.
Absolutely. And there's something very comforting where you don't have to explain yourself. It used
100%.
to make me very uncomfortable, and I've gotten very comfortable with it. I think any type of confidence building and
Yeah.
breaking any people pleasing, it's building a muscle, right? You have to like start
100%.
small, and the more you do it, the more comfortable you get with it. But no matter how comfortable you are with it, it's nice to be with people who are into the same things you're into. So, connecting with the Jewish Veg community, that's allowed me to really like realize like, oh, this is so nice just to like not have to
Absolutely.
explain like and if you're
And I think
somebody,
it helps people from failing, because sometimes people do go vegan and then they leave it because, well, it was too
yeah.
hard, or I didn't know, or I was hungry, which none of that is real. You don't have to be any of those things. It's a
Hmm.
very legitimate, fulfilling, healthy way to eat. I mean, if you could probably do it poorly, but also like having vegan friends, I think just helps. Like, this is who I am and I'm supported in it, and it's easy to be vegan.
Absolutely. And when you're supported, it reduces the stress in your
Right.
life when you have people who understand you and who can connect with you. And so there's no shortage of online communities. And
For
if you're in
sure.
an area with local communities, meetup.com is a great place to find
Totally. There's so many
meetups.
veg
There's a lot
meetups
of
in
vegan
Austin.
meetups.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Vegans
absolutely.
vegans really like to meet each other. And I will say too that, like, you're entering this group of people who are living, really compassionately. And some of these people that I've become friends with online, like, now have come to visit me, or we've met up somewhere. Like, these are real friends. So it also has really expanded the amount of real friends I have around the country, because there's something like so in common with each other, who have chosen to do something that's really different than the mainstream, and makes a statement of, like, I don't want to be a part of hurting animals. It's not necessary, and I'm
Mhm.
out. And so it's also a great way to make a bunch of friends.
Definitely, it definitely is. It's yeah, it's so great. I could talk about that a lot. But yeah, community is really amazing, and I think because you're connecting with people you have shared values with, and you're able to have that common point. And what's great too about connecting with vegans is if you're someone who's striving to be a vegan, by seeing how other people are doing it and how they made it work, and you can
Yes.
learn from everyone else's trials and tribulations from it, and because we all went through our own challenges at one point until
Right.
we got settled into our lifestyle, and so it's possible when you see other people who've been doing it for a long time, and so you can
100%.
learn a lot from others. um
Absolutely.
and then let's see, also just restaurants too. I know for me, I always research a restaurant, and a lot of places too, if they might have like a lot of sides. um
Right.
and so you can usually make a meal out of those things. And sometimes chefs are even happy to take on a challenge,
For
and
sure.
if you say, hey, I'm vegan, and sometimes it allows them to tap into their creativity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you can always look up stuff online, and there's apps that help with that too. A lot of people like the Happy Cow app, which,
I live with the
you
happy.
can just
I
like
am
type
always using
Happy Cow
that
app
happy
for
cow.
whatever city I'm going to, and it'll tell you where you can eat and what you can order there. And so it's not hard at all.
No, definitely not. That makes things easy. And then the let's see. Oh, and then we talked about supportive communities. Um Oh, here's one of the other success tips is, we've been talking about doing what's right for you. And a big part of being successful is that is getting clear on what your why is. Like that's a big part of
Mm-hmm.
what I do with my coaching is we have to understand why something's important to us. And because when it does get challenging and you do
Mm-hmm.
feel
Mm-hmm.
challenged and it feels difficult and part of you wants to quit, when you tap into that, why is this important to me? That can help you stay connected to what it is that you're trying to do.
Absolutely. And if you explain that that's your why to your friends, if they're real friends, they support you in it.
Absolutely, which, at some point, a topic I want to cover at some point on here is talking about relationships and friendships, because if people can't support who you
Yeah,
want to be authentically, it's not like you're telling them what they need to, but if people get upset because of your changes, then that has to do with
right.
them and not you.
Right. Absolutely.
I think we covered a lot of
The one
success
other
tips that I
thing that
listed.
I wanted to say, which I think we talked about talking about, but is that there are programs out there that people can sign up for that are free that can help
Mm,
them. So I just
sure.
want to make sure that anyone who is watching would know that you don't have to figure this out on your own. I mean, in addition to all these great recipe sites out there and all these YouTubers who are teaching you how to make amazing vegan foods, there are programs like Challenge 22, which is a free online program that you can sign up for where you get placed in a group and you can ask of the group, like, I'm struggling with, not having the regular cheese I have or whatever, and they can support you. There's nutritionists in there. So that's a 22-day
Mm,
virtual program. The thinking around that was that after you've done something for 21 days, it becomes easier. And they also teach you about the why behind it, why this is a better way for our planet, for personal health, for animals. And then
mhm.
there's a program called PAN that I've been involved with. It's the Peace Advocacy Network, and they have a vegan pledge and a vegan mentor program where you get assigned a mentor. I've been a mentor before. So where
Mm.
you predominantly did it alone, I was doing this, 20 plus years ago. I did it alone. People don't have to do it alone anymore these days. There's a lot out there to support you, to help you. It can be free of charge to help you, head in this direction should you want to.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'll include
Mm-hmm.
links to those as well below the video to make it easy, as well as all the other resources that have been very
Yeah,
helpful for both me and Lisa. Um, was there anything else you wanted to add before we wrap up?
I think that was it.
Okay, great. What's the best way for people to connect with you?
So the best way for people to connect with me is probably through my work email, which is lisa@jewishveg.org. And something else that I would like to say, in addition to those programs I mentioned, is that I like to meet with people one-on-one. In general, I'm meeting with Jewish people, but I certainly don't discriminate. If someone wants to learn about going vegan and wants to talk to me and has questions to me, I would meet with them. It's one of my favorite things to do. And I've done it for years and years, prior to actually coming to work in the vegan world. I just helped individual friends because so many people have said to me, like, well, I was thinking about it for years, or I know it's the right thing to do, or I want to do it. Can you help me? And yeah, because I've been vegan for so many decades, I
Mhm.
understand it's hard, it's confusing, it's complex, it's a learning curve. So whatever information I can give you to help you get there, I'm happy to support you. And then of course there's just the things like there's different brands that are better than others. I'd love, so you don't have to waste your money on a brand where that might not be as good, although of course that's subjective too. So yes, I'd be happy to be contacted, and I'm always happy to help anyone. This is kind of my mission in life.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming here and having this amazing conversation with me. This is certainly a part of my mission as well. I wanted to start talking about more about veganism because it's, it kind of ties into my mission of just helping others confidently be themselves. And
Mm-hmm,
this is a
mm-hmm.
whole other section of that. So it
Well,
was
you're
really great
super
having you.
welcome. I really enjoyed it. As you know, I've so enjoyed getting to know you, and I'm learning from you as well. The confidently be you and the reforming a recovering people pleaser. These are goals of mine as well. So I really appreciate your getting me to think too. And I'm totally with you that being vegan is about being true to yourself because it's going against the mainstream. And many people avoid it just because they think it'd be too hard. And if we can bust that myth, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Lisa, it was a pleasure having you here. I look
Thank
forward to
you.
having you back when we talk about living in tiny houses. That's going to be an exciting conversation. And
Definitely.
thank you all for joining, and take care, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.